Hello, Sunlets. It's Friday, and that means we have made it through another week. Today, we're going to talk about the 4th of May in Eastern European history. And more specifically, 4th of May in Latvian history is the re-establishment of an independent Republic of Latvia. That is the time when we separated from the Soviet Union. But we also have a special announcement at the end of the show from our school about the 4th of May and the importance of it in our history. But today we're going to go more in depth with the context of Latvia to the whole Baltic region and hopefully the whole of Eastern Europe and the, well, ex-Soviet republics. Today with me is joining Emils and, well, our guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
No, totally not. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm the host of the Eastern Border podcast, where I explain Soviet history to people and, well, also delve into modern Russian politics. But I'm here together with these nice fellows, and we're gonna have a nice conversation today. I hope. I believe it is a bit scary though, because I haven't been interviewed by someone live in a while, which is kind of crazy. But hey, I'm here for all of your Soviet questions and answers and stuff. Because I managed to be, I was like 2 years old when 4th of May happened. Yeah, I was born in 1989. No, I was 3 years old. Yeah, 3 years old when we got independence.
So that is pretty cool. And well, before we can actually talk about Latvia regaining its independence, let's talk about when Latvia as a nation was established. Since you're a historian, I believe you're a better expert than us.
Well, Latvia as a nation, well, obviously we're looking at the 1918, and well, the 18th of November is the official independence date, where Latvian Republic, as we know it today, was established. However, the date's quite disputed, actually, in a bizarre way, because when I was looking this one up, turns out that, for example, Great Britain de facto stated that yes, there exists a Latvia 2 days before, just because we sent our best diplomat, Siegfried Salnemirovich, to the UK. Mm-hmm. And apparently he managed to eke out a recognition of our existence before we ourselves even decided to legally declare our own existence, which is fun. But yeah, it was the original Latvia happened at the end of the World War One, when we, just like other nations of the Russian Empire, decided that we kind of want to go our own way. And then, well, us, the Estonians, Lithuanians, Finns, and everyone, after the Brest-Litovsk peace, and that happened already after the October Revolution, but basically as the Soviet Union at that time was in power, because the Russian Empire had collapsed, the Soviets in St. Petersburg were dealing with their own peace treaty, and they just had nothing to do. They didn't really affect us in any way or form. So at that point, when all the chaos was happening and Russian Empire was collapsing into its own pieces, well, that was the moment to strike, and that's when the fighting began. And then, well, it took to us like 18th of November 1919 as the original date, but we always have to remember that the peace treaty and the constitution happened only in 1922. The wars also went on up until early 1920. So it was about 2 years of, well, two and a half years of quite brutal warfare, and that included the Reds, the Whites, and kind of people who were representatives of the old German nobility. They had their own army as well, and we had to fight 3 different armies to establish this own country.
Yeah.
So that was the original thing.
So during that time, we basically went through a few presidents, and we actually had a dictator as the head of our government for a while. I believe it was Karl Zulmans.
Yeah.
And that happened during a time when a lot of countries decided to go, well, authoritarian is the way to go. We had, I believe, our neighboring countries, Estonia and Lithuania, had similar cases, or
Yeah, they did. It was a trend in most of Europe.
It was in Lithuania. It was Anton Smetana, and I think it was Pets in Estonia. But the thing is that a lot of people, well, this I'm going to tie this in with some modern day stuff because due to these things, due to these regimes, that is one of the cases why, as we also had authoritarian regimes, as most of Europe at the time, unlike most of Europe, we literally had no one, like Karl Sulmanis did not shoot any of his political opponents, and there were no like mass executions or really any huge repression. But it technically was an authoritarian regime because he was also one of our founding fathers. To our American listeners, what happened here was basically imagine if George Washington would just, he would establish the United States of America, and then after a couple of years, he would see that the Congress is just totally not working out, and he would just, usurp power for himself. That is about what happened in Latvia in 1918. And, well, he took power in 1935. But because of the fact that he was authoritarian, even though it was a very peaceful regime, that is why a lot of people like from this who kind of like to glorify the Soviet era tend to call the fact that the Soviets liberated us from the very authoritarian regime of Karlis Ulmanis, who was actually a fascist. All of these statements are utterly, completely not true. He was authoritarian to a point. He was by no means a vile person, but yeah, that's one of the things why people just tend to abuse that. But you should be very careful when analyzing such things because history tends to be used and abused for very wrong reasons very often.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next point. Well, he was an authoritarian, and during his reign, the Soviet Union kind of decided to, give us a contract of that they're gonna help us with their military force, and they just kind of intruded on our borders. If I'm simplifying that whole historical, I believe it was 1939 when the Soviets came into.
Yeah, the thing with that is the Winter War is already kind of happening. This happened a bit before, but it's happening at about the same time. And the Soviet Union, in no uncertain terms, basically states that, hey guys, we're gonna have our army inside of your borders, or else ... right? And sadly, what didn't happen but could have happened is the fact that we never had really any Baltic alliance or some work with Poland as such, because there was a kind of talk about intermarium or some sort of deeper alliance between these countries. That never formalized because Lithuania and Poland massively hated each other at the time. Because Poland had occupied Vilnius, their current capital, and declared it to be a part of Poland. So their relations went sour, which kind of split up, all the Baltics plus Poland, which could have had some diplomatic weight. Sadly, no. All the Baltic countries got the same ultimatum, and the Soviets led their troops in. What happened next? After then in late 1939. Of course, World War II breaks out since, Nazis attack Poland. 2 weeks later, Soviets also attack Poland. And later that year, Soviets also attack Finland in the so-called Winter War, which somehow isn't a part of World War II, but it's split out separately. And I haven't seen any non-political reasons as of why is it so. But yeah, that's the moment when we get to start being pummeled from all sides, because then Uncle Joe, how I like to call Mr. Stalin, basically does the same thing as the Nazis did with their assault on Poland. That is, he creates a border incident after he's gotten this, after he's pulled troops inside of Latvia. He arranges some sort of incident where he basically creates a false flag attack and presents it as if Latvian border guards had fired upon Soviet troops. So he uses that as a pretext for occupation, which already basically he gets his army there, so tanks are allowed on the streets. And then under nice little forced affair, a referendum is held, a massive vote where, First off, Ulman gets dethroned. Then there are elections in which, surprise, surprise, Soviet-funded Communist Party wins those elections. And then they held a nice little referendum where we joined the Soviet Union.
They proposed their own. No. It's all right because the whole referendum was illegal because there was only a few lists they could vote for, and the only other person.
I'll quote ancient Romans here. Do not quote laws to the people with swords.
Of course, no. One person, I remember reading something about one person tried to submit their own list, but before they could actually before they could actually submit it, they got arrested and probably shot.
And that list was Latvian Social Democratic Workers' Party, no less, which was an ancient party. Yes, I know that. The thing is, there were some naive people in that party who were looking at the Soviet Union, and they were kind of quite optimistic about it because they were espousing left-leaning ideas. I mean, Jānis Rainis, our poet, was a part of that party. And they were mostly social democrats. They weren't communists or anything oppressive like that. They were one of the two founding parties of Latvian Republic, just as the second one being the Latvian Farmers Union. But yeah, there were people who just went there in the ballot list, and when they read that, only left-leaning parties would be allowed to participate, they obviously gave their own social democratic list. And before it even got approved, everyone on that list and the person presenting that list were arrested. And then most of them died in the corner house, the KGB prison.
Yeah. So that's the moment. We as a nation stopped existing and we became a Soviet republic, basically. If I'm using the correct. That's
where my show starts. Yeah, sort of like
that. So if anyone actually wants to check out Soviet history in general, we're not going to go in really in depth. We don't have that much time, but check out his podcast. It's awesome. Please do. But
thank you. Let's go on. We have to cover the celebrations of the 4th of May first.
So what led to the 4th of May? We know that with Gorbachev and who was the last Soviet leader, basically the last Soviet leader, he basically almost allowed every single nation to just almost peacefully separate. So with that,
No, I'm just thinking. I'm thinking about what led the 4th of May. I mean, where do I start with this?
So we can start with Gorbachev and what he did.
Start of the 80s.
Yeah, what he actually did.
Guys, in my own show, that took me like about 8 hours of material, but condensing that into less than 5 minutes, sure, I can maybe manage to do that. Gorbachev comes up as the leader of the USSR, and he's a true believer in some sort of humane communism.
Yeah.
So he looks at all the totally corrupt system that doesn't work because everyone's drunk and there is like black market dealings everywhere. No one cares about anything whatsoever. Case in point, Chernobyl, which, as if you've seen the series, you know that it was literally caused by people not caring. So Gorbachev decides to do the perestroika thing because he thinks, if we can maybe establish some new social order and make this thing work. I mean, perestroika basically means that we're going to rework this communism thing, and then maybe people will believe in communism, and maybe this whole thing will exist. He missed out on the part where literally no one outside of Russia really wanted to live, under so-called communism in the Soviet Union because, we still had our own memories of, it was living past for some people who were like my grandpa's generation. Like my grandpa was born in 1933, so he remembered like Latvia being an independent country in his early childhood. And then Gorby starts perestroika, and then he finds out that people don't want to live under the Soviet system, that he cannot control anything, and the only way how he could possibly control it is by murdering insane amounts of people. Seeing as he at the at the time when independence happened, already had the Afghanistan war on his hands. A reminder that that part ended in 1989, and well, a lot of people died there, totally uselessly. And then Chernobyl happened, where also a lot of people died, and there were also other incidents, tons of them. I won't go into detail, but basically by this point, also Gorbachev decided that he's going to do the best part to improve productivity for the Soviet Union. He introduced the dry law in 1985. Which sounds silly, but due to how all the economy worked, due to how people were using liquor, their co-made liquor as currency, basically, that disrupted the whole economy thing. And I'm here in Ludza right now, right? But about 20 kilometers from here, we have this little village called Malnava, where we have the world's largest Samogon apparatus, which is literally like a train cistern-sized moonshine thing, right? And the thing is, that survived there from the 40s. Imagine this, in a little village next to the Russian border in Latvia, there was a moonshine apparatus that had existed since the 1940s. That's a part of their local economy because everything's deficit and you can't buy anything in stores. But yeah, Gorbachev decided to kind of cut down on the oppression stuff because he was already, well, his hands were bloody already. He couldn't control the economy, and then he blasted up the dry law, which just all that it did was increase the black market dealings already. And what happened in the black market? Well, I'm going there because that's where I can buy some sausage and some vodka. And hey, look at this, Radio Free Europe, some sort of tape recordings. Hey, might as well grab those as well. Which also helps to spread the general idea. And if people interact with the actual free market, like in the case of this Soviet black market, then they kind of see how, well, actual markets operate, and then they start to think, well, if this planned economy that we've been told all the time is the greatest economy in the world, that it doesn't have any sausage, but this illegal, totally free capitalist market has all the sausage, well, maybe we should pick the system with the most sausage. That's a very tiny little compression, but yeah, you can quote me on the fact that I said that people just pick the market with the most sausage.
So you're saying a part of the reason why the Soviet Union fell is the black market that existed because of the planned economy?
Definitely, yeah. Because people got to see the real kind of... They had another economy to compare it with. You know, they had like the Soviet one, the official one, which had nothing, and then they had the black market, which was how market forces operate, right? So that's part of it. Also on the black market, people just bought all the things that were prohibited. I mean, right now everyone has jeans, but when I looked at like my dad's old clothes, and he had like he had this very worn out pair of jeans which he had purchased in 1986, and it was like it cost like 200 rubles there, which would be like 600-700 euros in today's money. But if you approximate the value there, because if you had a pair of jeans, something like Western, yeah, because I looked at this. Because average person, if you were an engineer or something, you would make 120 to 200 rubles per month. That was your average salary. A pair of jeans were like 200 rubles. So it's a whole month's average salary, basically.
Wow. And that kind of illustrates really the social and economic problems the Soviet Union was actually facing in its entirety in that one, well, basically.
Yeah, but wait, I have to give you a legal disclaimer here. I literally stuffed up about 10 episodes of my show into a tiny little tidbit. It's not that simple, but I know that it works.
Yeah, no. But like to not go into detail, but basically the Soviet Union was suffering on an economic and a social level because of, well, in a way, because of Gorbachev's actions.
Even before that.
Yeah.
Let's start with Khrushchev, because the thing is, like, economy, and this is one of the examples that I gave in one of the episodes. Like, think about it this way: everything in the Soviet Union is state-owned. Okay, so if the Soviet army decides that we're gonna, well, I'll just use the Caribbean Cuban crisis example here because it's like the most obvious one. But the same thing happened everywhere, like all the time. Imagine this: Soviet army decides that, hey, we need to intimidate those American people. Let us put nukes in Cuba, which is friendly to us. But the Soviet army only has nukes. They don't really have ships, and they need transportation. So they go to Mr. General Secretary, and then they say, well, we need the Soviet Navy to transport our nukes and people to Cuba. Soviet Navy responds to this by stating that, oh, of course, this will cost, well, this much rubles, like X amount of rubles. So what happens, what happens is that General Secretary declares that the state will give money to the Soviet Navy, which the Soviet Navy will then give to the Soviet Army, which the Soviet Army will then give back to the state, if you can see how this is going. And then they will declare profit because they basically moved money from one pocket to another, and things happen because, like I said, state gave money to the Navy, Navy gave money to the Army, Army gave money back to the state. Economy moving, profits.
Okay.
And this with everything. All the things. I mean, people stole everything that wasn't bolted down, and what was bolted down, they used blowtorches to unbolt. Okay.
That's a very funny illustration, but let's end this serious note with a funny thing I've heard. I watched Gorbachev's documentary I watched it, and there was a very funny joke. I thought it was funny. So there were two people standing in line to get something. One guy says to the other, well, this sucks. I'm going to go and kill Gorbachev. He goes away, and the next day he comes back. The line is still there. The other guy asks, well, did you succeed in killing Gorbachev? And he responds, well, the line was even longer there. In a way, to illustrate the whole point of how Russia was suffering in general, the Soviet Union was suffering. But moving on. Well, it collapsed. It collapsed in a relatively short time. Like, when the idea came about, it just was executed, as far as I know. But did any state try to separate before the Soviet Union was disbanded?
Yeah, we did. Technically, we did. Technically, what happened is that we went away from the Soviet Union before it collapsed. Baltic countries are, well, even now, and I work with these people, but even right now in the Russian media, Baltic countries, or us Estonians, Lithuanians, are blamed for the collapse, you see, because we voted for our independence in 1990, 4th of May, but the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. That is why we had the barricades in February. Soviet Union, we left before the USSR collapsed, but that's because no one really wanted to live in the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And to kind of illustrate the differences too, we managed to leave for no small part of because the fact that in Moscow and in St. Petersburg there were massive protests. Like in Moscow, about 300,000 people went out in the streets for a protest action against the Soviet government for them to allow us to have an independent country. See, those are different times too. A lot of people were way friendlier. But yeah, we were the first ones to decide to leave. Then we were followed by also Georgia and Caucasus republics, but we left first. And one of the most important things that happened as we were leaving is the Baltic Way, the human chain that happened. Mm-hmm. Because that was the moment when, at that point, our political parties and political activists who had been trying to leave, they decided to do this first kind of mass movement, and we have a song about it too, and all the three languages and everything. But at that point, when the Baltic Way happened, then the Soviets understood that, wow, these people are united, and our political leaders understood that, hey, wow, if we organize, we can do something as huge as this, because that is still the longest human chain in human history. By the way, that's in Guinness World World Book of Records. You can check it out.
That's a fun fact for the day for our listeners here.
Do you know anyone personally that participated?
Yeah, my dad was there.
Oh, cool.
Well, it happened. It happened. It happened on the exact. I was born that day. My birthday is 28th of August. And it happened, I think, a few days before, 23rd of August. So my mom was in the hospital, and that was 1989 when I was born. And my dad was there, and he was nearby Cesis. So, but I think I think our parent generation, a lot of people in their 40s and their 30s 40s and 50s could do that and could remember being there. Okay. I'm not sure. I hope I'm not that old yet. I'm old, but I'm not that
old. Well, let's hope. Well, so those are basically the events that led to 4th of May. But what happened on the 4th of May, really? So.
Well, the thing is that we had this political party called Latvian National Front. Mm-hmm. National Front has gained the name itself has gained a lot of unpopular kind of sounding thing. It's gained a lot of weird noise around these times because if you call something the National Front, it associates with Nazis automatically these days. But it wasn't the case back then. It was just a movement for Latvian independence. And there was an election before to the Latvian Higher Council a year before, where other parties were permitted to participate besides the Communist Party. So the Latvian National Front managed to win the most seats, and on the 4th of May they voted to leave the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. Before then, there had been a referendum about that. By the way, there had been a referendum about whether or not the country should leave the Soviet Union. And this is one thing where I want to speak about political things because we've had some ethnic tensions over the years.
Oh yeah.
But at that point, and a lot of things about citizenship, non-citizenship, and I won't go into detail there. But you have to remember that at that point, Latvia was about 50% Latvian, 50% Russian, right?
Mm-hmm.
But 85% of people who could vote voted to leave the Soviet Union. So it wasn't just Latvians. It couldn't have been.
Mm-hmm.
There was a large Russian support for leaving the Soviet Union, but our own Latvian politicians managed to screw that up really, really bad. But that's outside of today's topic. Just know that, well, we also managed to do things very wrongly. But what happened then, on the 4th of May, was the fact that there was a massive vote about whether or not Latvia should leave the Soviet Union, and a lot of people voted that, well, yes, obviously. And Ivars Godmanis was chief among them, and there were a lot of people. But that was the historic vote, and after the vote, a lot of people just congregated around the Saeima, where our parliament is located, and that's the date that we call our independence, even though it's kind of bizarre in a way, if you think about it, because Soviet army wouldn't leave until 1983. We still had our barricades happening in front of us. We will still see people dying for independent Latvia. Like if you go to the park, the Basteikauns in Riga, just next to their Monument of Freedom, you can see memorial monuments to the people who were shot when there was a machine gun literally stuffed up in a building next to that place, and where the machine gun was shooting at people. There was still a lot of fighting after that, but I suppose we've picked that one date, the 4th of May, because it's the one that's kind of the lawful thing, where we decided that we would restore our independence. And that's an important thing, because we didn't choose to declare ourselves a new country. We decided to restore independence, to continue the previously existing country. But that also raises a lot of questions, since we're continuing our country from 1939, yet we're still having all the political entrappings from the country from the 1920s, and we're using the constitution of the 1920s instead of the Carlos Ulmanis one, as we're restoring a democracy and not a dictatorship. Look, it's all actually pretty shady. It's basically the same thing, but if you look into that thing, then we didn't really restore a dictatorship, did we? We didn't restore that. We didn't. But, like, you know, it's a PR thing, and we did restore our own country, but there's a little bit of interesting philosophical context if you look deeper into that. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to get Joe fired.
Yeah, so we apologize to our producer. We're very sorry. But that leads us to the next segment, which is less about history. Well, it's going to be about history, sorry. But it's about, like, since you touched upon the topic of restoring a country, that's what happened to our country, Latvia. That's where we come from, an independent. We come from a republic of Latvia. But what happened to other ex-Soviet states? Did they restore their their countries, or they chose to go a different way after the collapses?
Some did, some didn't. It really depended on how lucky you were. Because I mean it. Because, like, for example, there are two countries. There are two places in Russia, two states in Russia. One of them being Tatarstan, which declared their independence at the same time of the Soviet Union collapsing in 1991, and they had their own constitution, and they had their own referendum about leaving, except they were suppressed by the Russian federal authorities, and that referendum was declared as never happened, and we don't care about your constitution, you're a part of Russia. And then there were two bloody wars with Chechnya in the southern Caucasus about their independence too, which they lost, so then Russia declared them to also be just a part of Russia. But, well, we managed to jump off the bandwagon at the time, and what happened was that other countries who gained their independence were Estonia, Lithuania, Belarus, then Moldova, in a way, because they were also semi-connected to the Soviet Union, but Transnistria still remains there. Then, of course, Azerbaijan, Armenia. They are still locked in conflict, by the way, about the Mountain Karabakh, which is still a conflict raging on from that era. Then, of course, Georgia, Ukraine, all sorts of things. A lot of places which have very different, difficult ties with the Soviet Union. And here, well, then again, why do I care? I've been political and touching on touchy subjects and pointing out things all the time. Look at Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine and their Crimea situation, right? Yeah. Because technically Crimea was always more ethnically Crimean Tatar, but it was given to Ukraine by Khrushchev, who was himself Ukrainian. And then now it's back in Russia de facto because they did the same thing as 1994. It's all messed up. And but that's the weirdest part. Like, I've been to Ukraine myself, and one thing that I like to say is that among all the countries that managed to leave the Soviet sphere, we in the Baltics are among the most luckiest because, you know, there were also the satellite ones, but the ones who were, like, really a part of the USSR. Because when I went to Ukraine, those people... Like, that was the first country ever where I heard someone stating that, oh, wow, you guys are a part of the European Union. You are all wealthy and you're living, like, so well. You must be really fucking lucky. Oh, bleep. But I was quoting. He really used explicits there. Bleep it out. Please bleep it out before someone else sees it. But honestly, that was the thing. And that really stunned me so much. Because I remember this tall, bearded man, and he's like yelling at me because we're smoking a cigarette with him, we're talking with him, and he's one of those people who like uses swear words like every other second word, right? You know those people.
Yeah,
they exist, and he's doing this, and I try to be like civil about this, but I'm sorry that ran out of there, but. And he's just telling me, and he's like basically yelling at me about how lucky we Latvians are. And I'm sitting there and thinking, wow, if only some people in Latvia would know this, because as we spoke in our conversation before the show that, yeah, a lot of people in Latvia think that everything's terrible here, but it is not. It is not. Latvia is an awesome place, and you're sure it's not the best country on the planet Earth, but it's doing pretty okay. I think it's doing pretty okay.
Yeah,
but, and there are some people who would really, really like to be in our position, because in that 4th of May thing, we took a step in the right direction. And now, if you could look at the countries which took the step in the wrong direction, as I see it, like look at Belarus, with their own authoritarianism, their own problems, we could be there, instead we're here. And that's a positive. That's a positive.
Yeah, and that brings us to like a lot of ex-Soviet republics were, affected differently, and I wanted to ask you, like, how has it affected our value system? In a way, like, this is a very weird and a very philosophical question, but what separates ex-Soviet republics from any other, European state? What's different in our thinking? And
yeah. I've been talking about this for I've been talking about this on my show for a long time. See, we're tougher. We are tougher, literally. I'll start with the positives. We are tougher people. We don't complain much. I mean, look at that is one of the reasons why Latvia was used as one of the prime examples about how we got through the economics crisis of 2008, right? We are used to austerity measures. We're used to, when our government says, well, guys, everything's going straight down into the hole now. Everything's going to be terrible, so you just tough it up. And then we look at our governments and are like, well, everything's going to be bad now. At least they said it openly. So we're more used to surviving when times are bad. We're tougher because, we're used to this self-sufficiency. However, what's worse is that we're not as open to new ideas. We cannot change as swiftly. We're worse at doing business. We're worse off when times are good, but we are better off, relatively speaking, when times are bad. We're tougher, but we're less entrepreneurial. We're less business. Like we know how to survive. We don't know how to thrive. Okay, we know how to survive when times are tough, but we don't really know how to expand our businesses. We're not as innovative, so to speak. I've encountered this in my podcast, something like that.
Yeah, I have a note on this question as well. Actually, it refers to a book I read, I think, a year ago. And there was this American dude. He's like a writer, and he went to date with a Russian girl in St. Petersburg. And what he told her a cheesy joke, right? The kind of cheesy joke that you'd usually laugh at a date to pretend, you like the other person. She just plain out told her that's stupid. And so then the guy kind of started realizing that there was a difference in mentality, that in the Soviet Union, trust was like the number one thing. And so people who are a lot more honest, a lot more upfront, and I feel that's the way it is here, thrived a lot more. But in the Western world, it was more about how you present yourself. It was marketing. It was, how you show yourself to the world. So you had to learn all these pleasantries like please and thank you and be nice to others, etc., etc. So
I definitely, I agree with you here, because that's one thing about getting a date here. Like if you go on a date with someone, like if you found someone on some dating site and then you go on a date, you'll probably know if it'll work out or won't after the first date. Other person will usually tell you, or you'll tell them that nope, not gonna happen, and everyone's like peaceful about it. But about the honesty thing, yeah, and I think that's also because of the whole thing that you never knew whom your neighbor could be, whether or not they worked for the KGB, right? And that's how people learn that the trust thing, that being honest, is super important. And kind of also that's why the political jokes were born, because if you could first, if you meet someone new, what do you do with them? You have to learn if you can trust them. So you tell them kind of a harmful, like harmless sounding, like a very meager joke. And if they laugh about it, then you tell a bit more edgier joke. And if they laugh about that, then maybe you can go on and talk to them about what you really think. And all this testing out people's trust and all that stuff. Yeah, I think that's a thing, because we really we really never had to solve much of stuff, because at least I don't know how it's with you guys, but at least when I was about to go to college, then I told my relatives that I wanted to become a businessman, do something for my own, for myself, right? And everyone told me that around me that, well, why would you want to start your own business, become an engineer or something? Because no one wants to take risks, and everyone looks at starting your own business and being a businessman. At least they used to. I don't know how it's like right now. 5 years have passed, or 6. But people tended to look at being a businessman as something dishonorable, something like you have a lot of money, but it's still kind of sleazy, and you must have cheated or something.
I believe it comes from. I believe it comes from when Latvia and other Baltic states were really coming back into, this new economic system. A lot of people exploited that, and you had quite a lot of rich
glorious
people.
90s.
Exactly, and that's where it comes from. When you were rich, you probably did something shady. You did something to, to grab more space to sell your thing, or to put more of your businesses in that specific area.
So you know what that makes sense, by the way? Mm-hmm. It ties into the beginning of the episode, remember, about the black market that I told you about?
Yes.
So, imagine the fact that only the people who were already smugglers and criminals were the most experienced in capitalism. So when capitalism came, they had the most market knowledge, so they basically grabbed the most of the market.
Oh, I never thought about that.
In a way, capitalism made, if we look at this from a very Soviet point of view, and I don't believe this, but we can look at this in a funny way, that Soviets were right about capitalists being evil. Yeah. We can laugh about it in that way, but
just the thing is because in the Soviet system, market, business, being a businessman was a crime. That means that when the Soviet system collapsed, people who were best at business were criminals.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for talking to us, and thank you for giving everything you gave us today.
It was nice being here, and please do check out my own show, The Eastern Border. I'll send everyone from The Eastern Border on this show as well. And hey, I'll be very happy to have you on my show at some point. And if you need anything from me, feel free to let me know. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next week. This has been San
Wait! The message from your school. The message from your school.
The message from our school.
Don't forget it.
Yes. It has been the San Terra, and we'll leave you with the message from our school. Bye.
Galdiņam bija 4 stūri, visi 4 vajadzīgs. Galdiņam bija 4 stūri, visi 4 vajadzīgs.
Sveiciens, mīļie spīdolieši, jums Latvijas Republikas neatkarības atjaunošanas dienā. Godināsim šo dienu, kurā drosmīgi tika pausta tautas griba.
4. maijs ir Latvijas Republikas neatkarības deklarācijas pasludināšanas gada diena, jeb Baltā galdota svētki.
Tas ir veids, kā svinēt Latvijas 2. dzimšanas dienu.
Dienu, kad pirms 30 gadiem izvēlējāmies brīvību.
Neatkarība ir viena no brīvības formām. Brīvība ir iespēja dzīvot pašam savu dzīvi, iespēja viņu veidot pašam tādu, kādu tu vēlies. Man ir ļoti svarīgi, ka es varu runāt savas tautas valodā. Tas, ka es varu stāvēt šajā tērpā un justies lepni.
Šodien mums ir brīvība domāt un runāt.
Brīvība uzdrīkstēties un darīt.
Brīvība ir izvēle būt laimīgam.
Radīt un svinēt.
Brīvība izvēlēties.
Brīvība palīdzēt citiem grūtībās.
Mana brīvība ir baudīt pavasari un just ievziedu smaržu.
Brīvība radīt dziesmu, kas iedvesmo.
Tikai pateicoties šai tautas gribai, Latvija 2. reizi ieguva neatkarību.
Ar lepnumu un deksmi darīt savu darbu, nesot darba augļus kā sev, tā saviem līdzcilvēkiem.
Man patīk būt kopā ar saviem mīļajiem. Mums ir brīvība redzēt sāpīgo, neērto un grūto, un nepalikt vienaldzīgiem.
Šogad esam kopā ar saviem tuviniekiem, ar saviem mīļajiem vecākiem, varbūt arī ar vecvecākiem. Ja gadienā jums ir kādi radinieki, kas dzīvo tālāk no jums, piezvaniet viņiem, nosūtiet virtuālo sveicienu, klājiet balto galdautu, sviniet svētkus, esat kopā. Sagādājiet pārsteigumu saviem kaimiņiem un garām gājējiem, uztaisiet sveicienu un ievietojiet šo sveicienu savā logā.
Mūsu laiku varonis ir katrs, kurš izvēlās varēt un darīt. Šogad Baltā galdauta svētkos ir iespējams veikt dažādas kopīgas aktivitātes ģimenes lokā, piemēram, iestādīt puķus,
izgraznot māju un pagalmu, kopīgi nokrāsot sētu.
Brīvība ir ideja un tā mīt katrā no mums.
Šai dienā mēs apzināti svinam savas valsts esību un godinām tos, kuri palīdzējuši to radīt un nosargāt.
Ar katru gadu svētki tiek papildināti ar vēl kādām tradīcijām. Sadziedāšanos,
sadejošanu,
kopīgu sportošanu
un sarunām par sevi un Latvijai svarīgo.
Man brīvība nozīmē strādāt savā mīļajā spīdolā un darboties par prieku jums skolnieki, mani kolēģi.
Svētku sarīkošana neprasa ne lielus resursus, ne daudz darba, bet tie sagādā patīkamus mirkļus
un atziņu, cik lielu balto galdautu šādam gadījumam katrs atradīs.
Cik daudz Latvijai raksturīgu priekšmetu katram ir mājās,
cik bieži mēs ikdienā aizdomājamies par to,
ko mums nozīmē Latvija.
Šī ir tikai nesen dzimusi tradīcija, tomēr tās saknes un pamati meklējami mūsu senču paražās un tikumos.
Viņi baltu galdu klājuši visos gados, mātītes laikā aicinot domāt tīras domas un runāt skaidru valodu.
Tāpēc arī šodien, sagaidot svētkus, aicinam pie galda sēsties.
Ar baltām domām.
Svētkos vilksim baltu kreklu.
Un klāsim baltu galdautu.
Svinēsim brīvības svētkus.
Pēdējos 3 gadus mēs klājām brīnum skaistu, galdautu, garu, baltu, ziediem rotātu mūsu māte ielas pagalmā. Šodien to mēs varam izdarīt šeit, mūsu mediju klasē. Svinēsim šos svētkus kopā. Svinēsim attālināti, tāpat kā mācamies. Atcerieties, ka svētkus veidojam mēs paši, un svētki ir tur, kur esam mēs. Sveiciens Latvijai!
Uz 4. mīļamā, ej laimīņā tu papriek.